Welcome to another episode of the Bottomless Pit Podcast. We are back after a week off because both Foley and I were off travelling. He went to Barbados and I was in Poland. In this week's episode, you're only going to hear from me as I talk all about what I got up to in Poland, including the free walking tours, escape rooms, and a step-by-step account of another bout of hitchhiking that I did while I was over there. Foley will be back joining me in next week's episode, but for now it's just me. This is something I've never done before, so it's a new arm to our podcast arsenal, and since we are the Bottomless Pit Podcast, the possibilities are endless. I recorded this while sitting outdoors in a really beautiful spot in Winchester, England, so you will hear some background noise from the wind at certain points, but hopefully it doesn't bother you too much. If you enjoy this episode, please consider subscribing to us wherever you get podcasts, and do come and follow us on Twitter at the BP Podcast, where we are very active. Also, this episode is the bringer of good news for the podcast. We were recently contacted and invited to join a podcast network, Britpod Scene, which we were thrilled to accept. Britpod Scene is a network of 90 plus podcasts hosted by British podcasters and Foley, and there is definitely something for everyone within the network. So if you're interested in discovering some new podcasts, then go check out their Twitter page at Britpod Scene to keep up to date with the latest podcast action coming out of the UK. That's it for now. I hope you enjoy episode 36 of the Bottomless Pit Podcast.
The Bottomless Pit. Find us on social media and everywhere you get podcasts.
Alright, so we arrived into Wroclaw on Friday morning, me and a friend of mine, and we had the whole day there to see the city a little bit before we would get a bus actually over to Dresden, back over into Germany. We were going to do a free walking tour of the city, just to get to know the place a little bit, but it was raining, it was cold, we didn't really fancy it, we weren't really sure if the tour would even be running, so instead we went for a few beers, had some food, and just sort of killed time until the evening. They also had a wonderful little Christmas market on, which was quite a lovely coincidence. We didn't really know that was going to be there, but it was lovely to see the Polish traditional Christmas nativity scenes and stuff. They were slightly different to what you might expect from the British, American, Canadian traditions. In the evening, we got a bus over to Dresden, and that's because I've got a couple of friends who live over there. They're one of them's German, one of them's from the Czech Republic. They live in the new town of Dresden rather than the old town. However, the new town is older than the old town, and that's because in World War II the old town was destroyed and flattened, so all the buildings there, although they look very old, are actually brand new sort of reproductions of the original buildings. However, in the new town, the building that my friends lived in is a 19th century beautiful building with lovely big windows, big rooms, high ceilinged rooms, and they've got a flat to themselves, a 3-roomed flat. And interestingly, no television. Now, I mention that because I didn't notice it at all while I was there, that they didn't have a TV. What they did have was a lot of books, a record player, musical instruments, and interesting conversation, essentially. So we would sit around the table, have some beers, have some food, and listen to music. Not a clue that there wasn't a TV there until it was mentioned by one of the guys. We ended up having the whole weekend in Dresden. It was lovely. Did a little tour of the town because the friend that I was travelling with had never been there before, so they gave us a full tour of the old and the new town. It was wonderful. And all of a sudden, the two locals who we were staying with said, we've been invited to a surprise birthday party tonight. Would you like to come? Or rather, we're going to go. You kind of have to come because we can't let you into our flat later otherwise unless you're with us or unless you're there at the same time as us. So we were like, sure, why not? It was a surprise birthday party for a friend of the locals who I was with from the Czech Republic. And we all went early to an Italian restaurant in order to surprise her. So there was about maybe 10 or 12 of us there. Arrived before the birthday girl. She arrives later, all surprised, with her boyfriend, who was just meant to be taking her out for a meal, as far as she was concerned. She looks down the table and just sees these two complete stranger English boys, who she's never seen before. So that was a little bit awkward, but she was absolutely more than welcoming and happy to have us with her. She bought everyone shots to say thank you for the surprise. If you know anything about the Czech Republic, you'll know that their favourite sort of spirit is called slivovitz. Now, slivovitz, regardless of what the Czechs say, is actually disgusting. It's supposed to taste like fruit, but it just tastes like fire. But it was nice of her. It was a nice gesture, obviously. She then said, well, I live around the corner. Let's all go up to have a house party at mine. And so we did. It was me, my friend from England, and then me 6 Germans and 6 Czechs. Also one guy from Syria, and an Italian. We were all in this flat, drinking, having fun, drinking a lot more Slivovitz, a lot more shots, and getting drunk. And it was just a weird time, but a great time, until the birthday girl whose flat it was said, "Oh, I'm going to go out partying now. You guys feel free to stay." So most of her friends who were already in on this surprise party went out with her, except for me and the guys we were staying with, who she kind of forced us to stay and drink in her flat, although she wasn't there. It was kind of strange. It was very, very friendly, but it was kind of weird. But we did. We stayed for another drink, drank her booze. Just one, we didn't take the piss. But yeah, that was a kind of a weird one. After that, we sort of decided to head home and stumble back via an Irish pub, because the guys I was with, they're not, British or Irish, and they have recently gained a liking for cider and for Guinness. So we thought, well, Irish pub, let's go in there. Wonderful. And they even had live music on that night, which was perfect. Overall, it was just a wonderful time in Dresden with my couple of friends. It was great to see them. I haven't seen them for a good few months now, because I'm obviously back living in England, as you probably know if you listened to the podcast before. On the Sunday, we decided to head back over to Poland, to the city of Wrocław, where we were originally flying to. The reason for this being, well, first of all, we wanted to see that city because it was a new place, but also because two other friends from England were flying out that night to meet us there, to have a few days with us in that city. As you may remember, we took a bus from Wrocław to Dresden originally. Now, we were going to do the same thing to go back. However, the bus to get to Dresden was €9. The bus to get back was €50 and would have taken 8 hours, because we would have had to go via Berlin. I've no idea why. That was the case. It just happened to be the routes on Sunday. Also, taking a train would have cost well over €100. It just wasn't going to be done. I don't have that sort of money, and even if I did, that's kind of asking a lot. So what we decided to do, I talked to my friend who's never done this before and sort of asked him if he fancied it, and we decided to hitchhike. For him, it was his first ever time. For me, it was my first time in over a year, so about 18 months since I last hitchhiked. I have only ever hitchhiked once before with another guy, so, you can imagine, well, a lot of people who've never hitchhiked before will think that hitchhiking just doesn't work anyway, or that it's dangerous, or people aren't going to stop to pick up a male hitchhiker in particular. You might imagine that, well, in that case, picking up two male hitchhikers is going to be nigh on impossible. I've only ever done it once before, and it's definitely a lot harder than when I'm by myself or when I'm hitchhiking with a girl. First off, because there's an extra body, you need a car that's got two seats rather than one, which can be a lot of an ask quite a lot of the time, particularly on a Sunday. A lot of people seem to be, travelling either back home or to somewhere ready for the week, so they had full cars. Like, you could just see by looking in, the boots were full, the back seats were full, sometimes even the front seats were full. It was quite difficult. There weren't even too many cars on the road anyway to begin with. But, I said to my friend, look, it's probably going to take a long time, or longer than you might expect, because there's two guys, but we will get there. The key to hitchhiking is to always know that someone will pick you up eventually, you just don't know when. The hardest part of hitchhiking is actually getting onto the motorway. Once you're on the motorway, the next hardest part is changing motorways. And what we managed to do was, our friend who lived in Dresden very kindly gave us a ride out of Dresden to the first service station on the motorway that went directly to Wrocław, the city we were trying to go to. Now, this meant that a lot of the difficulty of the hitchhike was taken away from us, which was wonderful. The reason we decided to opt for the easy option is because we did have a deadline to be in Wrocław for about 6 o'clock in the evening to meet our friends who were just arriving. Otherwise, I might have been tempted to try and hitchhike out of Dresden, but that would have really been an all-day type of thing, because we would have also had to skip over an intersection of motorways as well, which, if traffic is sort of splitting there, then you're halving the traffic opportunities that you've got. What we managed to do is get to a service station that was, the next city was Wrocław, where we needed to go. It's still about 200 kilometers, 150 miles or so, but it was the next major city, so we could pretty much guarantee that the majority of the traffic that was passing us was going to go to that city. So what I like to do when I'm hitchhiking is stand at the very exit of the service station, so where the on-ramp to the motorway starts again. Well, the reason for this is that you get absolutely everybody who is at the services, whether they're going to get petrol or whether they're just going to the toilet or to the restaurant, And what we decided to do was stand there for, my general rule is I kind of like to think that, at least in Germany, you'll get someone to stop every half an hour. They might not take you every time, but you get someone to stop and ask where you're going, roughly every half hour. If you're standing there for 2 hours and you've had no luck, then time to change tactics. Now, that's exactly what happened. There weren't many cars driving from these services. It was a Sunday, and the ones that were either were sort of old people or single females or just full cars, like I said. 2 hours passed, it was cold, about 5 degrees C, and then it started to rain. As you can imagine, that wasn't the most pleasant thing in the world, but the thing you do when it starts to rain if you're standing out in the open, obviously, is to get under cover, because not only is it uncomfortable for you, people do not want to have a soaking wet hitchhiker in their car necessarily. So what we do is went to the petrol station. Now, this is obviously almost halving our opportunities because we're missing all the people going to the restaurant or to the toilet, but at least we're undercover, we're dry, and we can actually approach people and ask them face to face, which some people believe makes it harder for them to turn down, but I'm not so sure. I think it's kind of hit and miss with that. I've had different experiences. We were there for maybe half an hour, and this female, this lady, pulled up, I don't know, early 30s or so, quite small, slim, and I thought, sure, I'll ask her. I mean, I was asking everyone else that went by. She had a Polish number plate on her car. I thought, great, she's more than likely going over the border. I said to her in German, are you going towards Wrocław? She understood, but her English was better than her German, so she just asked me, like, yeah, where do you want to go exactly? And I told her. She said, yeah, sure, I've got one space. I said, you don't happen to have two, just because I'm actually travelling with a friend. She said no, because she's got a fridge in the back. And I was like, is there any way, and like, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to have an actual seat, it doesn't have to be comfortable. Is there absolutely any way you could maybe just squeeze another person in there? And she went, all right, just give me a minute. And she went back to her car, moved a few things around, and gave me the thumbs up sign. So me and my friend went over to her and climbed in her car, and she gave us a ride all the way to Wrocław. When I started that day, I knew it was going to be more difficult to hitchhike as two guys. At no point did I expect a single female to be the one who would take us all the way. That was amazing. She was a great person. She was actually a tattoo artist, but she, travels all over Europe, meeting other tattoo artists, learning from each other, sharing tips and sharing skills and all that kind of stuff. She was a great person. We were able to chat. We were with her for about 2 hours in the car. Chatted for most of that way, listened to some music for the rest of it, and she wasn't actually going to Wrocław. She was going to a city 100 kilometres away from there, which, as she told us, happened to be the place where the first ever bomb in World War II was dropped, which is, the Nazis invaded Poland, and that was the sort of first attack, which was kind of interesting. But anyway, she dropped us off in Wrocław. We walked into the city, and we arrived at our hostel 8 minutes before our two friends did, who had flown into the airport, which was amazing timing. We couldn't have timed it any better than that. Our holiday in Wrocław had now begun. It was very much a British lads on tour type of holiday for 3 days. We would go out, we would try as many different beers as we could. We would eat a lot of food, a lot of Polish food, a lot of street food. Particularly with the Christmas market there, street food was everywhere and it was wonderful. Had a lot of pierogies and a lot of lard and butter and a lot of just meats and potatoes in various forms. All amazing stuff. We also did 4 escape rooms while we were there. Now, I want to do an episode on escape rooms separately, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of what they are. But if you do know what they are, you'll know that they are a lot of fun. If you don't know what they are, just Google escape rooms and see for yourselves, or wait until our episode comes out later in the future. The escape rooms we did had 4 different themes. The first one we did was called The Orphanage, and it was kind of like a creepy sort of, if you know the film The Orphan, in fact, like where it's the kind of just really kind of a horror scenario. It's similar to that, we were in an orphanage and the girl was kind of possessed in some way, and it was kind of creepy, and we had to solve a load of riddles and escape from the room, which we managed to do in about 35 minutes out of the hour that we were given. The next one we did was an Alice in Wonderland theme, obviously totally different to the orphanage one, not creepy at all, just a bit more surreal. If you were on acid, it would have been amazing. Unfortunately for us, we weren't, and it wasn't the best escape room we've ever done. However, it did take us 59 minutes to get out of due to a couple of silly little mistakes that we made as a team. But hey-ho, that happens. The third one we did was called Identity. Now, this one was very, very good. It was based in it was an escape from a kind of a military bunker. And you started off handcuffed and blindfolded. So the first thing you had to do was unshackle yourself somehow, find the keys and all that good stuff. One of the team was actually locked in a cabinet that we had to, quote unquote, blow up with dynamite in order to get him free, which was really cool. And we managed to get out of that one as well. We did that in about 45 minutes. So far we got 100% success rate. One of the guys who we are with, who's done over 10 of these escape rooms, has 100% success rate of escaping. The final and best, in my opinion, escape room that we did was called Betrayal in Breslau. Breslau is the German name for Wrocław. It used to be a German city, and that was the name for it. And it was a fantastic theme of you breaking into an apartment of a guy who has been having an affair, and the woman that he's having an affair with has gone missing. So I'm not going to give away too much, but your team of 4, 2 of you start off in the apartment, and 2 of you again are blindfolded and shackled in the basement. You have to free yourselves, meet each other, meet the other 2, and solve a load of riddles to find out what happened to the girl. I'm not going to spoil the ending because it's fucking fantastic. You actually are given an hour and a half for this one, or an hour and 15 minutes, I can't remember which, one of the 2. You're given longer than an hour anyway, and we still didn't get out of it in that time. Luckily for us, there were no groups expected to come in after us, so the games master, who is always watching and listening via cameras and microphones set out and all over the place, she decided to just let us keep playing, which was fantastic. It ended up taking us about 2 hours in total to get out of that room. It was very difficult, but it was so cool. It was a lot of fun, lots of different riddles, different types of game, different types of puzzle. It was really fantastic, and the twist at the end was great, quite gruesome. So we did our escape rooms. After that, there was a lot more beer, a lot more food, and a lot more of a hangover, until those 2 friends who flew into Wrocław left us again on the Wednesday morning. Me and my friend, the original friend who came with me to Dresden, we're still left behind in Poland for 2 full days. It's Wednesday morning, we're flying on Thursday evening, we've got 2 whole days to fill. If you remember, back at the beginning, we were going to do a free walking tour of Wrocław on that first Sunday, but it was wet and cold and horrible, so we didn't really want to do it then. I suggested it again. Wednesday was quite a nice day. It was still cold, about 10 degrees this time, but it was nice enough weather. It was sunny, it was dry. And we decided to do a World War II and Jewish heritage tour, first of all, which was really interesting. Obviously, you think about Poland and its Jewish heritage, you will very much link that to World War II, where those are where the ghettos were, for the Jewish ghettos, and that's where the Jews got rounded up and sent away to the concentration camps, and all those horrible things happened. There's, as a result, a massive history with Jewish heritage in Poland, and in Wrocław it's the same. So we learned a lot about that. Very well recommend that tour. All the free walking tours, essentially, they're just so interesting. The guys who do it are doing it full time. They just work for tips. So it is free to you. If you choose you want to leave halfway through because you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. If you get to the end, you think, I've done the whole thing, but still, it wasn't that good. You can still leave. It's only a tip-based thing. And these guys in particular, who do these free walking tours in Wrocław, there was zero pressure on you to do the tips. In fact, one of them, we ended up doing 2 tours. I'll talk about the second one in a second. One of them forgot almost to even ask for tips. He did the tour, blah, 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 finished. All right, thank you for the tour. If you need any directions to anywhere, I'm just going to be here for the next 10 minutes. I can help you, guide you. I've got a map. I can show you where you need to go. And it's almost like an afterthought. He went, oh, and here's a bag if you want to give me tips. Just put some money in the bag. And it was genuine. It wasn't a play. You could tell he genuinely forgot to ask for that part. It was completely no pressure. So we learned a lot about that, about the history of the World War II stuff. The fact that Wrocław was the final city to surrender during the war, so it was taken over by the Nazis, of course, and between 1939 and 1945. And on the 2nd of, I believe this is correct, I might be a couple of days out here, but on the 2nd of May 1945 was when Berlin was taken. However, 4 days later, Wrocław was still under siege by the Soviets, surrounding the Germans who were trying to hold Wrocław, or Breslau as they were calling it. Yeah, so this is 4 days later, until the day before the official end of the war. Wrocław was still at battle despite Berlin having already been taken. It was the last city. There's pretty interesting stuff. On the next day, we decided to do the Old Town tour, so just learning about the history of Wrocław itself. The fact that it's been under numerous rules during its history. I mean, the same goes for the whole of Poland in general. It's been under German rule, Russian, Soviet, Czech, Austrian, all that stuff. They've had a lot of fights, the Polish, but they don't seem to have won a lot. It's a shame, but that's the truth behind it. But Wrocław has got a lot of names in its history. I think the guy said it's got over 30 names, but one of the names it's not is Wroclaw, which is how a lot of English speakers would call it, because that's what it looks like when it's written down. Wroclaw looks like Wroclaw with a silent W at the front. It's actually pronounced Wrocław, or the Germans Breslau, like I've mentioned, or in Latin they even call it Vratislavia or Breslavia. I think that was correct, the last one. But apparently there are 30 different official names for that city. It would have used to be, obviously, completely German-speaking. It used to be part of Germany. Even this is before the war. It used to be part of Germany officially. And then after the war, when the borders were being rearranged, the Soviets, or the Russians, however you want to call them, sort of encroached on what was Polish land and decided they were going to stretch their borders across Poland. They took Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia as well, in exchange for losing the eastern part of their country, which has actually now become parts of Belarus and Ukraine. Poland was given the western parts of their country at the expense of Germany, who a lot of the world wanted to punish because of the war. So Germany lost its eastern borders, which included Wrocław or Breslau, and Breslau became a Polish city. And since then, it has been a Polish city. Obviously, it's been under Soviet rule, but it has always been in that area now that we now call Poland. And at the fall of the Iron Curtain in the 90s, it still remained a Polish city. Again, amazingly interesting tour, and free walking tours are in pretty much every major city you can think of. I think in the world, definitely in the Americas and Europe, at least those are the ones I've done, and I can't recommend them more. We'll probably do another podcast on them, or at least do some little travel guides about cities based on the information that we've learned on those free walking tours. They really are great. Yeah, that's about it really. This has been a little bit of a special podcast episode, just myself today, but it's just because we got back from travelling. Foley was in Barbados, he's gone back to Canada, I was in Poland, I'm back in England. Our schedule's a little bit off. We haven't been able to quite make a podcast or arrange to make a podcast ourselves today, so I thought I'd do one by myself, a monologue. It's the first time I've ever done this, so if you enjoyed it, let us know. And if you didn't, then, maybe keep it to yourself. Alright, that was what I was getting up to last week in Germany and Poland. Hopefully you can now see why we were unable to release an episode last Thursday, and you'll forgive us. But what about Foley, I hear you ask? Well, he's back in Canada now, after spending some time down in Barbados, but we'll talk more about that in next week's episode. Until then though, feel free to go ahead and subscribe to us wherever you get podcasts. Just search the Bottomless Pit Podcast and look for the green TBP logo. This way you can find our entire back catalogue, including 2 whole episodes dedicated to hitchhiking stories, if the one I told you in today's episode wet your whistle. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TheBP Podcast, and if you want to contact the show, please go ahead and fire over an email to bottomlesspitpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you and we'll reply as soon as we can. We hope to see you back here next week for another episode, and until then guys, bye bye.